Muy bienvenidos a nuestro webinar de este mes, septiembre. Hoy vamos a escuchar la presentación de Johan Rooryck sobre la coalición S, todo lo que se ha hecho los últimos 5 años y qué se está planificando para los próximos 5 años. Como siempre, el formato es que Johan va a hacer una presentación de media hora máximo y luego vamos a tener un poquito de espacio para sus preguntas que como siempre nos pueden pasar por el chat que mis colegas están monitoreando y que luego vamos a presentar a Johan. So the format is the format as always, which is that there will be presentation of 20 to 30 minutes. And then, and in the meantime, you can ask your questions or make any comments in the chat, and with the help of my colleagues, we will then present those questions to Johan after his presentation. So with that, Johan, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being there, and yeah, very curious to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, Wouter. Muchas gracias por invitarme. Me gustaría precisar que las preguntas pueden hacerse en español como en inglés. Es simplemente que no tuve tiempo para traducir toda mi presentación en español. Es que hablo español y entiendo muy bien, pero es que para esa presentación me hubiera costado mucho tiempo para traducirlo. Es que puedo presentarlo, pero sin embargo es más fácil en inglés por razones obvias, espero. Así que disculpa por presentarlo en inglés. Okay, the Coalitionist Initiative and the road ahead. So first of all, what is Coalitionist? Well, it is a coalition or a consortium actually of 28 organizations worldwide of funders, national funders from Australia to the UK, also involving Quebec. Many people think Coalitionist is a European initiative. Yes, that's how it started. But now we also have, Australia on board and Quebec. And also, of course, charitable foundations from the US, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, Templeton World Charity, and a number of members that come from the World Health Organization, Jordan, Zambia, and South Africa. We jointly invest about 35 billion euros in research funds each year, which results in about 150,000 articles a year, just to give you an idea of who we are, what we do. So Plan S was devised in 2018 as a plan actually to accelerate open access. So the idea is here on the screen. It's one idea, is a single purpose that is underscored by 10 principles, namely that all scholarly publications and results should be published in open access. All publications that are supported by funds from these funders should be published in open access as of 21. Published open access in any way, shape, or form, so that is in journals, on repositories, or in any other form, but the paper should be available open access with a CC-BY license. So a CC-BY license is a license that allows other people to use and reuse the work as long as proper credit is given. But it also allows researchers to retain their intellectual rights on the paper. So it is the most open license. It allows users to share and adapt the publication, provided that, as I said, that appropriate credit is given. And that is why we insist on it. So it's a very clear goal, as you can see, and it is supported by a number of strong principles. I will not give you the 10 principles, but the idea is clear, is indicated here. So open access must be immediate. We do not accept embargo periods. It must be a CC-BY license. We do not want researchers to publish in hybrid publications. So those are journals that have part of the journal behind the paywall and part of the journal in open access. So we want to force publishers to move their journals entirely to full open access. We think that pricing and contracts and publication fees should be transparent and in line with the services provided. We didn't quite succeed there. It's not something that the publishers seem to be ready to do. And the funders have also committed in the original planners to support these publication fees, and so that individual researchers that are part of planners do not pay. This is problematic for reasons that I will indicate later. And there is also a commitment, this is a commitment about research assessment, a commitment to assess research outputs based on their intrinsic merit and not on their value of publication or quantitative metrics. This is the DORA commitment, this is also the cOAra commitment. So, you know, to de-emphasize journal metrics and the importance of the journal. I think that has succeeded with the funders. The funders no longer apply these old-fashioned metrics when they are selecting researchers to give research funds to. Important to know is that Plan S itself is not a policy. It's a set of these 10 principles, and the Coalition S funders have agreed to implement these principles in a coordinated way to align their policies with these principles as much as possible. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, but it's a kind of a declaration of principle. We want to go in that general direction. Okay, so how does this work? Well, in the last 5 years, this was the way we did things. We had, and this is also something that we will probably continue to have in the future. Authors can publish anywhere, but subject to certain conditions. So there are 3 routes to compliance. Route 1 is to publication in full open access journals that is compliant and it is supported by the funders. So if a researcher wants to publish their article in a full open access journal and has to pay for it, has to pay an APC, then the funder is committed to paying for that, either through the grant or in another way, but there is that commitment. So we had it originally to encourage publishers as well to offer more gold open access venues. The second route was a slightly more problematic road. I would say that is the road publication in subscription journals. So it is allowed under Plan S to publish in a subscription journal, so a journal with a paywall if you want. If the author deposits a copy of the author-accepted manuscript in a repository at publication. So no embargo, but there must be a copy. So the journal can be published behind a paywall, but there must be a copy available in open access via a repository. So that was the deal. And then the third route is publication in journals that are under a transformative arrangement. Transformative arrangements are these arrangements where there are deals between publishers on the one hand and libraries on the other that allow the researchers at those institutions of the libraries to publish for free and in open access in these journals. So that at least the journal is partly open for the research of those researchers. We had hoped that these transformative arrangements would lead to full open access originally, which has not proved entirely realistic. So what do we do to help our researchers? Because of course we can't expect researchers to know about each journal how this works. So we have developed the journal checker tool, and the journal checker tool is basically a search tool that allows researchers to type in the name of their favorite journal, as you can see here, Cell, to type in the name of the funder that funds them, and the location where they are working at, because the location is important, for instance, to identify transformative arrangements. And then there are various, they get advice, what they must do in order to be compliant with Plan S and with the requirements of the funder. So it's a very handy tool for someone to say, okay, I want to publish in this journal. What should I do? Should I pay a fee? Am I under a transformative arrangement? Or no, this is a subscription journal. I will have to deposit my paper in a repository. So this is the tool that we developed to help our researchers. So I already said what transformative arrangements are. These publishing models where publishers are committed to transitioning subscription and hybrid journals to open access. This is something for the library consortia, so we do not have a direct say over it. But we also know that some funders do financially contribute to these initiatives, and they are actively involved very often in the negotiations leading to these agreements. So that's why we supported these things as well. The most difficult route, as I said, is the route 2, because the route 2 means that you have to go against the publishers, basically. Namely, if you publish in a subscription journal, very often you transfer your copyright to the publisher, and that means that the publisher very often then demands that there be an embargo period, and we don't want that embargo period. So what we have devised for this was called the rights retention strategy. So our first principle was that authors and institutions must retain their copyright to their institutions, and this can be done via an open license, namely this CC-BY license that I already mentioned. Now, what we also found is that many researchers, after 30 years of copyright transfers, many researchers don't even realize that they have the original copyright of their papers. And in fact, it is always the copyright holder that decides how to license their work. So if you if you put a CC-BY license on your work, then you keep sufficient intellectual rights to reuse it and share it in a repository. CC-BY basically says, I can do with this paper what I want, and all other people can too, provided they give me credit. But it basically assigns the rights to the researcher, and then those rights are not so easily transferable to publisher. So that's why we think that open access starts at the source, the author who keeps their rights by putting a CC-BY license on their paper. I'll say in a minute why that is important. So there is this conflict that I already mentioned. Authors want to publish in a subscription journal because they say, look, this subscription journal is the most important journal in my field. And then we as founders demand of them that they should put the author-accepted manuscript, so that is the final manuscript before it is published in the journal, to deposit that in the repository immediately on publication. But there are these copyright transfer agreements that interfere with this. And this is what the right retention does. By asking our authors, both in the contract and elsewhere, by asking our authors to say, look, there is a CC-BY license on all the papers that come out of this research by contract, and you also have to state this yourself when submitting it to the publisher, then you will keep your rights, because a later copyright transfer agreement has to abide by the conditions of the previous license CC-BY, and that legal precedence, as I put it on the slide, that legal precedence is binding, and no publisher has challenged that. We have about 5,000, we can see, thousands and thousands. I think some people say 5,000, some people say 10,000 papers that have been deposited in repositories in this way. Of course, the publishers don't like it, but that's a different story. Publishers don't like it very much because, of course, then they don't have the copyright that they want. But a publisher, in our view, can always refuse the paper if they don't like the conditions that the author has set as the original copyright holder of the paper. So the mere assertion of the CC-BY license is sufficient for a researcher to be able to deposit a copy of the author-accepted manuscript in an open repository at publication. So what authors need to do is basically, like I said, this is a kind of a double approach. On the one hand, it is in their contract with the funders that all of the papers coming out are subject to CC-BY no matter what. And the second thing is they have to, of course, out of fairness to the publishers, they have to inform the publishers that they are subject to this requirement. So this is what the text in blue does. For the purpose of open access, the author has applied a CC-BY license to any author-accepted manuscript that would arise from this submission. I mean, that's something. So how announcing, look, I am under this condition, this is what I have to do. And then that allows them, if the publisher accepts to handle that paper, that allows them to make an AAM open access in a repository. Okay. Now, The rights retention strategy is not without problems because, of course, publishers have found ways around it by rerouting authors towards paying options, saying, look, I mean, if you put this a CC BY license, all good and well, but then you'll have to pay, which is a little bit putting the researcher in the middle, of course, and this is problematic. But at the same time, rights retention has received broad support by the UNESCO Declaration, the G6 Declaration in 21, the EUA, European University Association Agenda of 25, and the European Council in June 22. So the idea of rights retention is certainly one that has taken root with many international and regional organizations. So this is very important to note. Second thing that is important to note, that especially in the UK and in Norway, institutions have adopted the rights retention strategy. So University of Cambridge, Edinburgh, Tromsø in Norway, Bergback. There are about, I think, 35 institutions now in the UK that have adopted it, and about 8 in Norway. This is not always possible in every country, but it's certainly worth looking at it. Why? Because an institutional rights retention policy is much stronger than a funder policy, because the universities are the direct employers of the researchers, and rights retention then becomes a contractual obligation on the one hand, and at the same time it allows the university to protect the researcher in case there is pressure from the publishers. Publisher, of course, if the research is put under any pressure by the publisher, then the publisher would be committing the tort of procuring a breach of contract, which is punishable by law. So it really protects researchers pretty well against publishers, and that is one of the things I think are very positive about institutional rights retention. Now, we have also done a number of other things. In 2021, we formulated some principles around, or some recommendations around academic books, because we didn't have that. And so there we are a little bit more lenient. There we say that there can be embargo periods. This is also because the book industry, the academic book industry, is much less advanced and requires much more investment sometimes than journals. And so we formulated a number of principles that indeed there should be a CC license, but not necessarily a CC BY license. There can be an embargo period, but not more than 12 months. And also a commitment there from the funders that they will support financially these open access books. And also that we will work together with existing well-known organizations for open access to books, like OAPEN and the OA Books Network. We increasingly over the years, I mean, I think I already announced it a little bit, over the years, we realized that something was missing, and namely open access provides equity for all readers. All articles are available to everyone, right? I mean, you can read, but in fact, this largely shifts the cost from the reader to the producer of knowledge and the author or their employer. And that is far from equitable, because of course, I mean, the people who are able to pay 3,000 euros for their article to be published open access in a journal by, for instance, Springer, those are people who have money. I mean, and that money is not equally available to everyone on the planet, as we know. And indeed, you know, people who are funded by research organizations like our research organizations can perhaps afford it because their grant includes it, but many other researchers cannot, and that creates inequity between researchers, which is really not a good idea. We think that everybody should be able to participate in the scholarly conversation. As you know, article processing charges are very unfair. It's basically one price fits all. And we have, I mean, this slide is a bit outdated, I realize now. We have launched publishing a framework, two activities actually, to have a pricing framework that takes purchasing power parity into account. as a more equitable way. So we are asking publishers, in fact, to look at their prices and differentiate them according to the country. And another thing we have done is to launch a tool that allows librarians and other people who are interested in buying services from publishers to rank solutions on a scale of equity. So equity is really more on our minds now than it was. I mean, I think in the beginning we had this idea, we will have a deal with the publishers. If they move to open access, we will pay for it. But actually what we found is, in fact, that publishers really took advantage of that, increased prices for article processing charges incredibly over the last 5 years, did not provide the transparency that we asked for. So we have a little bit come back from the idea that gold open access, paying for APCs, is the ideal route to open access. That is certainly something that we are no longer believing in, and actually also a bit concerned about in terms of the sustainability of the costs. So we have moved towards, sorry, this is a bit more. So we are looking at other options like subscribe to open and especially Diamond Open Access. So for instance, 2 years ago, we launched the Diamond Action Plan. Diamond Open Access journals and platforms do not charge fees to either of readers, and in this sense, it is much more equitable. There are the big examples here for us are Red America and Cielo in Latin America, who do this, who have most of their journals or all of their journals in Diamond Open Access, which they call non-commercial open access, and which really is ideal in the sense that everybody can read and everybody can publish, and the only criterion is the quality of the contribution. So we have then, of course, formulated the Diamond Action Plan as a plan to align and develop common resources for the Diamond ecosystem. This was launched by 4 organizations: the French Agency for Research, Coalition S, Operas, an organization in Europe that supports research, and Science Europe, which combines all European research funders. And about 150 organizations have signed up to it. And we've also received money from the EC to develop this DIAMAS project and the Craft OA project, which are now well underway in formulating a number of tools and producing a number of tools that will be able to support Diamond Capacity Hub going forward. This is something that we will do. Coming out of this in January 25, we will be launching the European Diamond Capacity Hub to coordinate and align Diamond Open Access publishers and journals, of course, in Europe, and to make sure that Diamond Open Access becomes a strong, equitable alternative to commercial publishing. So you could say some of you would probably say you have finally seen the light. I mean, I don't think that's entirely wrong. So this also will inform our future strategy. Our future strategy is very much based on the increased recognition that open science needs more than the open access version of record. So we are sort of moving away, if you'd like, from the article to the other outputs that are connected to the article. Those should also be open. We believe that even if open access to the peer-reviewed article is the focus that we have, we will also want to ensure that other outputs that underpin this article are also made open access in the interest of open science. So by that we mean preprint versions. We want to show that preprint versions are just as important as the article. We want to show that peer reviews are just as important and should be made open so that we can see what the peer reviewer contributed, because one of the things we want to do is to make sure that everyone who contributes to that research article, not just the author, is given credit for the contribution that they made to the article. We also want access to the data, open and fair research data, the protocols, the code, and also, of course, to the metadata of the article. So these are the things we want to do after 25. We had the first 5 years, but after 25, this is like the broader scope that we want to have in cOAlition. As Now, I have to say this strategy still needs to be approved by our leaders meeting, so we are not sure yet that this will be done, but this is a scoop, if you like, for you, of the things that we would like to do in our future strategy. So that's one pillar of our strategy. The second pillar is indeed increased recognition of the need for not-for-profit publishing infrastructure, not just for articles, but also for open peer reviews and for data. So Diamond Capacity Hub, I already mentioned it. You see a logo on the screen. And the plans for ORE, Open Research Europe, which is basically a way to publish preprints that are then peer-reviewed. So the idea is there that we would move away from the article and insist more on an open peer review process around an initial preprint. And that is what ORE is trying to do. At the same time, we want to talk about more responsible publishing. We believe that traditional publishing is inequitable, slow, and opaque, and that pre-publication peer review is not recognized and not rewarded, only visible to editors, and insist on improvement before publication. So basically, the work that the reviewer does is not properly recognized, and it is not open, and there's a huge waste there, because when the article is rejected, then the article has to be submitted again in another journal and submit and go to another phase with new reviewers, and that all that is much too slow. So this is something that we want again to try and move away from. On the basis of 5 principles, this is something that we did in the work that we did in the last year, namely authors have to have control over the content they create. Their research outputs must be shared openly. There's quality control must be community-based, so there must be open peer review by the community itself. All these scholarly outputs, not just the article, must be considered in research assessment, and there should be all of this should be done via a scholar-led communication system. So that is what ORE is becoming, for instance, and we want to see more of that going forward. So where this proposal would take us is something like this. It's called the publish, review, curate process. So you publish the preprint first, then that preprint is sent to reviewers for review. Those reviews are printed alongside the article. The article is then validated by editors or by the reviewers. That depends on the system you use. And then there is a final version that the author can prepare that can be published and that can be curated, for instance, in a journal, or it can remain on the repository. But it is much less linked. So the entire publication process is much less linked to that holy grail of the version of record. There is actually a record of versions, as some people have said. So namely, you have the preprints, you have the reviews, you have the final version or versions, and you can see what the process is like and not just the final product. That is something that we would like to see happen. So we had a consultation process for this. With focus groups, with an online survey from researchers. 10,000 researchers in the world responded to this with relatively positive results. People were willing to try that. So this is definitely something that we are going to consider moving forward, not as our only focus, but as one of the foci. And the results have been published by the cOAlition as leaders group, and there was some optimism that we could be moving towards this in the future. So some take-home messages. What you could do in your respective remits, perhaps, is to develop an open access policy that is similar to the one that we have. Write rights retention into a national policy. I think rights retention is really something that we should take for granted going forward, like in Slovenia or in Spain. Develop a policy for Diamond Open Access and the action plan for Diamond Open Access, because Diamond really is the only equitable solution for authors and readers. And consider towards responsible publishing, or join Open Research Europe in some way, or set up your own publish, review, curate system locally. This is what researchers have done in France and in the Netherlands with quite some success. So, and at the individual level, I would say, if you are part of an institution, you should use CC BY to retain your rights as an individual author, an individual researcher, and you could join or set up a Diamond Open Access journal. That is, I think, another piece of advice that I would want to stop with. Thank you very much. I think I have arrived at the end of my slides.
Thank you so much.
Was this a half an hour?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was a half an hour. Perfect. Perfectly on time. Thank you so much, Johan. Very interesting, very inspiring, your presentation. We have a few questions from the audience. First question from Enrique Burton. So in the list of the funding agencies or the founders and the participants that you showed at the beginning, there's not many Latin American organizations. So what's the reason, and how could this possibly be more successful in Latin America and the Caribbean?
Yeah, that's a delicate question. I mean, I've tried. I mean, I went to Colombia, and but the explanation that I was always given is that the situation is more complicated because of the strong presence of Diamond Open Access. And it is true that at least initially, Coalition S and Plan S put a lot of emphasis on the Gold Open Access route, which I think scared a lot of Latin American countries to join, simply because they don't have the fund. I mean, we said, well, the funders should pay for, we said sort of very boldly and maybe naively, we said, well, the funders should pay for open access fees. And I believe in many Latin American countries, that was simply impossible. Latin American funders could not promise that to their authors. And there was an alternative system in place, let's be honest, that was just as good as gold open access. But of course, I mean, you know, what could happen is that then, you know, if they simply subscribe to the Plan S principles as they were, that would sort of legitimize authors to ask their funders for funding to publish in very expensive journals rather than in local journals. I think that was one of the reasons. Now, of course, that we are moving away from this, I think we are having a completely different conversation. And I hope to be able to convince Latin American countries that they should join in this new configuration, which is much more flexible and allows for an emphasis on more equitable open access, which is something that we should do together. I myself taken the initiative of, for instance, with the UNESCO to work on a global alliance of the Diamond Open Access that should allow us to work amongst regions, Africa, you know, Asia, Europe, Latin America, to develop Diamond Open Access as the alternative to Gold Open Access. And I really hope that this is something we can do together with Latin American governments and Latin American funders. I mean, we are already working together with Red America in the context of a number of projects that will only intensify in the next few years. So I really hope that that will extend also not just to the publishing level, but also to the level of funders, Latin American funders joining Coalition S. And then there was, of course, the usual, let's say, diffidence from Latin America, which is very understandable for historical reasons, or another European initiative, right? I mean, the Europeans are going to come tell us what to do. So I think that all of these reasons contributed to there not being incredible enthusiasm in Latin America for what we were doing. I think that is changing. I think we are really working on establishing more confidence between us, especially, you know, in our collaboration with Red America and in the context of the Global Alliance for Diamond Open Access. So I really hope that we can change this and work together in a productive way, which we have to do if we want to avoid these enormous Gold Open Access charges between 3,000 and 10,000 for a single paper. That's just not sustainable. It's not, I mean, it's not possible in Latin America, but it's not sustainable for Europe either. It's just not possible. So we need to find another way to organize scholarly communication. That's the challenge before us. Sorry, that's a very long answer, but if you...
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, well, as you said, we're making progress. So that really sounds like a plan, and I think there's
Yes, I really think also the help of UNESCO in this will be
yeah.
crucial as a neutral party to develop this in line with the UNESCO recommendation of 2021 on open science, which said exactly this, in fact, which was also what opened our eyes. The notion of equitable open access really comes from that recommendation. And then we really said, oh, yes, of course. I mean, it's all nice and well to think about your own researchers, the funded researchers that you have, but what about all the others? Yeah, we are not alone on this planet as coalition, rich coalition as funders. There's also people who cannot participate in the conversation if they are required to pay. Right? That was sort of a late realization. I think too late, but okay, we do what we can.
Yeah. All right. Sounds great. Then a second question from Polaris. A DISC-funded study has recently identified that at the present rate of transition, it will take at least 70 years for major global publishers to transition to full open access. So what?
Yes.
That's
So I
interesting.
mean,
So what needs to be done to make the flip to full open access faster?
yeah, my own opinion on this is relatively radical. I think we need to put much more pressure on the existing commercial publishers for them to mend their ways. And the only way we can put pressure is by building an alternative publication system that really challenges them and that will force them to provide transparency or at least a system that is much more accessible for authors. I mean, the situation that I want to arrive at, Paul, is the following. I mean, here you have a researcher having the choice between a Diamond Open Access journal and a Gold Open Access journal that asks them to pay 3,000 euros. And they're both of the same quality and they're both of the same standing in the field. What do you think the researcher will choose, right? I mean, that's the situation I want to arrive at. I know that is idealistic, but I do think it is feasible if we put our minds to it. And actually, I know you have done a number of things at UCL in that direction. So,
All right. Thank you so much for that. Next question, Johan. How do you see technology and AI shaping the future of open access publishing? And also, I mean, connecting with the previous question, can AI and technology contribute to a faster transition to open access?
a faster transition to open access, I don't know. I mean, there are people who have said that. The people who said, well, look, I mean, what you could do, of course, is use AI to use all the existing content behind the paywall and then have it reformulate. I'm a little bit wary about that because, I mean, I think the capacities, and I've talked to linguist friends who know these things. I think the capacities of AI are vastly overrated. I mean, we have to understand that, in fact, AI doesn't understand what it is doing. It is just associating new sentences on the basis of old information. And we know that things go wrong. So let's just say that the reliability of what comes out of AI is just not that high. So then you need people to verify the reliability of what comes out. So basically, one of the risks is that you are creating more work for yourself than there was before. So I think we need to exercise caution with AI and not think that it will be the panacea for all of our trouble. But at the same time, I do think that we need to think about it. We need to think about responsible ways of using AI. For instance, I think one responsible way of using AI is when you imagine you write a paper and you're an author from a country where English is not widely spoken and English is your second or third language or fourth language, and you don't master English very well, but then it might be good to use AI to improve your English and then check the English that comes out yourself to see if there's not too many errors, that whatever is said there is indeed the intention that you had. And then you can use that, of course. So that I think is an intelligent use of AI. AI as a kind of a way of making publishing more equitable, because we know there are inequities around this, right? And we know that native speakers of English have an advantage. People who don't speak English natively or have not been properly have not been received an education in English academic prose have a disadvantage. And this would be a way of rectifying that. So I think there's good and bad in AI. I think, and what we need to do, and this is something that we will also give attention to in cOAlition as going forward, is to have a task force or maybe launch a study about this funded by the funders to say, look, experts in this field, please give us advice of how AI could be used, because so without rejecting it, but also using it cautiously in those cases where it needs to be used cautiously. So basically, we want to develop recommendations for the responsible use of AI in academic publishing. I mean, that's not a complete answer to your question, but we are thinking about it, is the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And then a reaction from Paul. I agree that the Diamond open access route is the one to follow, not the transitional agreements. But Diamond open access cannot immediately replace big transitional deals. There will be a period when we have to fund both. And alas, I'm not sure universities and funders can or will fund this. What's your reaction to Paul's comment there?
I share the alas. I think it will, especially in budget, in the context of budget cuts, it's going to be tough. I think there's choices will have to be made. Because I don't think it's a matter of what is more expensive or less expensive. I think certainly initially Diamond Open Access is probably not going to be so much less expensive, because you have to set it up, right? I think the big argument in favor of Diamond Open Access is that it controls the costs. So the cost of the cost of the transitional agreements is very difficult to control. The publishers set it one way or another, and it's true that libraries and librarians push back and sometimes make good inroads into those profits. But there is not always a concerted plan, and I think Paul will agree with me there, to use the savings that come from these transitional agreements year on year or in a systematic way to build alternatives. Usually these things are then absorbed as what Graham Stone calls not real money in other projects that the university has, and it's not prioritized to build the scholarly communication infrastructure that we need. So I think we need a much more concerted effort to indeed think about transitional deals, but also think about the alternative infrastructure that we want to build and find ways of mitigating the two. And I mean, some of us, like Chris Boer, for instance, at MIT, have shown that if you don't do the full deals, but also only as a university, pick those journals that your researchers are actually reading and not the fluff that the publisher is trying to sell you, that you can actually realize a lot of savings. So that's another route. I mean, it's not like deals are written in stone, right? I mean, you don't have to accept them. There's alternatives that are available now and that help librarians choose those journals that they really need. I mean, I know that's not going to be possible for every university. Some university really needs all those. Some universities will really need all those journals, but still, I think we could think of ways of differentiating the portfolio of journals that specific journals need for the researchers that they serve.
All right. Thank you, Johan. A question from Osvaldo Gallardo. So what is cOAlition S doing, or what is cOAlition S position regarding the adoption of peer review and open peer review, and open data?
Yes, like I said, we will move to a position where we will stimulate that. We will stimulate open peer review. That's why we have ORE as well. Right, we will stimulate infrastructure for open peer review, because there are still, there is some like Publons, but that's a commercial enterprise. I think we should also have an open source publicly owned infrastructure where open peer reviews can be posted independently from the article. So there again, my ideal is, for instance, that you could see on such a site the profile of a researcher who does a lot of reviews, because you can learn a lot from that, from what that person does, the style that they have as a reviewer, for instance. So and only when you have that material available can you evaluate that researcher properly for that contribution. So that's one of the things that really needs to be built. Same for data. My own view on data is that we should put much more pressure on journals to make the data behind the article available. This is something that I do at my journal, for instance. Since a few years, people have told, my co-editors told me, look, we should have an open data policy. And since then, what we do is when we have a submission and the author doesn't make their data available, we say, sorry, but you have to make your data available. You have to promise that your data will be available at the moment of publication. If you don't do that, we don't consider your article. I mean, that's a pretty big threat, right? I mean, so you basically make it a condition for submission that the data will be available at publication. And if every journal did that, we would have a lot of data at our finger, at the end of our fingers. And so this is one of the things we want to do. We want to expand from the article, the published article, to all of the connected elements to it. So I hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, I think so. You mentioned the relation between Europe, because you said, another European initiative. So I think, we here in Latin America and the Caribbean, we fairly agree on what the objective is, right? But of course, the reality in Europe and Latin America is different. And so the way to get to this common objective may be different. So one of the questions here from Lulimar is that this offer of the cOAlition S, how can we translate this to the Latin American reality? Well, there's no one Latin American reality, of course. I think that's part
yes,
of the
and as I said, we are
diversity there.
but I see totally what
from the cOAlition.
Yeah, I totally see what you mean. Well, I think we have to be. I think going forward, we will be much more flexible. What we are going to try and do is to, instead of working on principles that have to be complied with, we will work with work streams. We will adapt to the local situation, because we know, this is something we've learned also over the 5 years. Although we had these 10 principles, what we also noticed is that, the 28 funders never really implemented those principles in the same way, because exactly the local situation did not allow it. So this is something that we will work into the cOAlition as a matter of principle going forward, that we recognize this diversity, and that as long as we are all agreed on what should be done, namely making more elements open, in whatever the local situation affords. If it's via, whether it's via repositories or via Diamond Open Access or other solutions, as long as the end goal of making those outputs, data, articles, preprints, peer reviews, those things open, as long as there is an effort in that direction, then we're good. That is, and as long as there is a plan in coordination with us to move towards that, and that we can pool our information. Because one of the big things I think that is challenging us in this entire system is that we do not pool our information enough. This one of the big advantages that I found in the last 5 years of cOAlition S is to be able to work with the experts of these various countries and say, okay, I work in the following national situation. Do you guys, any of you guys, have a solution for this? And then there would always be someone who say, hey, yeah, we have had that problem. Here is a solution. Maybe you can use that in your local situation. And that was very often the case. And I think if we can do this worldwide, or if we can do this worldwide in collaboration with Latin American countries and with countries in Africa and countries elsewhere, then we are much, much stronger, because we can really make open science a reality in a diverse way. I mean, it doesn't have to be a single way, but trying to align our solutions rather than impose them from above. I hope that is an answer to your question, Lolimar.
Yeah, I think so, and then I hope Lolimar is happy with this. What emerging trends in scholarly communication or technology do you foresee influencing the next phase of cOAlition S's work?
Technology.
Or trends in scholarly communication?
Yeah, okay. Trends in scholarly communication that I would like to see is really this general move to more types of outputs being made open. So, like I said, preprints, peer reviews, and this is also a point of attention for Diamond Open Access, by the way, because my own journal still doesn't have open peer review, also because it's a technological problem. But we're moving there. I mean, I'm harping on the developers every day to get this done. So open peer reviews, open data, open metadata in agreement with the Barcelona Declaration that was recently made. That is something that I see very much going forward. Another thing that will make this possible, or that should make this possible, is also that we have, and I hope that will be realized, is that we have more recognition for these various elements, that there is less of an emphasis on the published article, that the published article is simply seen as one stage of the publication process, and that we can make, in fact, all the elements, all the stages of the publication process more open. That is what I'm hoping for. And indeed, an increase in Diamond Open Access, intelligent increase in Diamond Open Access, also, creating new journals in those domains where there are none. I mean, we know that Diamond Open Access, especially in social sciences and in humanities, I think there should be more journals in the STEM disciplines that are in Diamond Open Access. And that is really something that I also would like to work towards. So, yeah, those are the kinds of trends that I hope to see realized in the next 5 years.
All right. And then I think a final question. What would be your message to Latin American and Caribbean institutions and researchers trying to move towards full and immediate open access? What would be your recommendation now to move faster in that direction?
Support the Diamond Open Access journals and capacity centers in your region. Cielo, Redalica Medica, there are no doubt others. Those should be supported. Create journals in the domains that don't have them yet. I mean, don't have this fascination for the journals of the Global North. Create your own journals. Invite people from the Global North to sit on your editorial board. So don't do this alone. Those would be my So, let's try to move towards a system where this division north-south is not relevant anymore, but where we learn from each other, and where we show that we work together, and do this in Diamond Open Access. This is something we can do. Like some of you know, I am the editor of Diamond Open Access Journal. I work for free in that journal. Some people don't like the idea of working for free, but this is something I do in my free time because I think it is important. And, people can do this in their research time. It's not very hard to set up a journal. It's work, but it's honest work, And there's a lot of satisfaction in knowing when you set up a Diamond Open Access Journal to get letters from Indonesia or from South Africa or from anywhere, Vladivostok, where people say, "Hey, I was able to read your papers in your journal because they are in open access." And you see a difference. You can make a difference because the journal that I'm editing is among the best ones in linguistics. And you don't have to believe me. You can go to Google Scholar and look it up. It's very possible to make high quality journals in Diamond Open Access if you are well connected, if you use the tools that Relica Medica or Cielo put at your disposal. And And you have to know now that this has become a worldwide effort. It's not something that in which you are alone, but it's actually supported by UNESCO. It's supported by what is going to become a global alliance of Diamond Open Access. And that is what I think we should do to move faster to more open access in the near future. Thank you.
So basically, reinforce local initiatives, but do it together.
Reinforce local initiatives intelligently, yeah.
Yeah.
But don't reinvent the wheel. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So yes, local initiatives, but use tools that are regionally available.
Yeah.
And that are quality-wise quite high.
Yeah, and don't do, of course, I mean, this is all what cOAlition has and other coalitions is about, of course. I mean, don't reinvent the wheel, and don't do it in isolation, because, I mean, obviously,
Exactly.
there's
and also scholarship is a global effort, right? I mean,
yeah.
It's very rare that in any field, I mean, except maybe, thatched roofs in Moldavia, but in most fields are worldwide fields, right? There's a worldwide network of researchers participating. Use that network when setting up a journal.
Right.
Use the regional tools that are at your disposal. I mean, you don't have to have you can use open journal systems to set up your journal, but work with people who know that system and who can help you set it up. There is more help available than you think if you ask around.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Johan. And with that, we're going to close this webinar. Thank you so much
Thank you for inviting me again.
The audience attending this webinar. As always, the recording as well as your presentation will be available on our website. Yeah, so I mean, also would like to thank my team, the people here at the ECLAC Library, who has always been supporting and preparing this webinar. So mention me here, Lynn, Jennifer, Jaime, Claudia, and the whole team of the ECLAC Library. So thank you so much, Johan. This was a very inspiring talk. Gives us some work and some material to think about during the weekend. Como siempre, muchas gracias a la audiencia que estuvo acá hoy. Gracias a todo el equipo de la Biblioteca Hernán Santa Cruz de CEPAL, Naciones Unidas, Claudia, Jennifer, Lynn, Jaime y todo el equipo de la biblioteca. Yo creo que con la presentación de Johan y el material que como siempre vamos a compartir a través de nuestro sitio web y la grabación, nos da suficiente material para reflexionar un poquito en fin de semana y ver cómo podemos sacar adelante este importante tema de full and immediate open access. Muchas gracias.
Espero que más allá del fin de semana también.
Más allá del fin de semana, pero vengamos el lunes con, digamos, algunas tareas concretas para efectivamente seguir trabajando en eso.
Siempre a su disposición para ayudarles a lograr eso.
Perfecto, excelente. Muchas gracias, Johan. Muchas gracias a todo el mundo y le deseo un excelente fin de semana. A great weekend to all of you, and we hope to see you again in October for our next webinar. Thank you so much and have a great weekend. Bye bye. Nos vemos. Buen fin de semana. Chao, chao.